Hi everyone, Gridlock Cosplay here. I'm about to show you some techniques for working with PVC pipe, particularly as it applies to building cosplay costumes and props. Now first I'm going to go over some of the tools and materials that you're going to need, and then I'll get into some of the basic techniques. I love working with PVC pipe because it's strong, it's easy to work with, and most importantly, it's inexpensive. At Home Depot, you can pick up a 10-foot length of half-inch PVC for under $5, and the joints range from about 33 cents for elbows to just over $1 for any of the other ones we need. For our purposes, get the electrical conduit PVC, not the water grade pipe. The water grade stuff is double the price, and it might not even work as well. I like to keep a stock of the joints so that I have them at a moment's notice, and everything you see here costs under $15, so it really doesn't take that much of an investment. For cutting pipe, you can use a hacksaw, but I recommend using a pipe cutting tool if you're going to get really serious about it. There are a couple different kinds of cutters. I use this adjustable cutter, which costs about $6 to $20. There are some cutters that are scissor-like and generally much faster at cutting. They range from about $12 to $60, but in my experience, it has been difficult to get a really straight cut using the scissors. You should avoid using power tools for chopping through your PVC pipe because the friction that it puts on it causes it to start to burn and give off the bad fumes. And speaking of fumes, PVC producers say that they're harmless, and Greenpeace says that they're going to end the world. I say use a bit of common sense, work in a ventilated area, and if you accidentally burn your PVC, don't breathe the smoke. You'll need a few other standard tools such as a drill, sandpaper, ruler, Sharpie, knife, hacksaw, hammer, and of course a heat gun. Some people use hair dryers, but a heat gun works much better. I got this one at Princess Auto for $35. For some of the methods I'll be showing, sandpaper won't be quite as easy or efficient as using a rotary tool, but still possible to accomplish. For attaching pipe to a joint, you will need some short screws. You could use glue, of course, but in the case where you're building something very large, you will want to disassemble it. Glue won't let you, screws will. For attaching one piece of PVC directly to another without a joint, I recommend using bolts. I like to use these 10-24 bolts in varying lengths. They work well whether you need the joint to move or stay still, and again, during the invention process, it is easy to take apart. You could also use some longer screws, but the sharp ends can be quite dangerous if you don't grind them down. Screws are also not nearly as strong and can snap off if they have any regular high-stress movement. Now we can get to some of the technique. The fact that PVC bends when heated makes it extremely versatile, so let's start with that. Take your PVC in one hand, wear a glove, and your heat gun in the other. My gun has two settings, high and low. I use the low setting because the PVC needs to be heated evenly and slowly. Turn the pipe in your hand and wave the heat gun over the area that you want to bend. You shouldn't try to heat more than 10 inches of pipe at once because the heat gun might not be able to sustain the heat over that wide of an area. Eventually, the pipe will start to become flexible, but continue heating until the section you are working with is uniformly soft. You can get a bad bend if you don't heat the area properly. Keep in mind also that the PVC pipe is fairly thick. Even though the outside may be hot, the inside needs to absorb the heat from the outside, so be patient as you're applying the heat. It may take upwards of 5 minutes to get a section of pipe to be warm enough to bend. Once the pipe is hot enough, put your heat gun out of the way and hold the pipe in the shape that you want it to be. If you have an extra hand, use a cold wet cloth on the pipe to cool it instantly. If you need to shape two pipes identically, tape them together in several places along their length. Heat the area that needs bending and then bend both pipes at the same time, keeping them lined up with each other. For fastening an end of pipe to a joint, push the pipe all the way into the joint and tap the joint with a hammer to be sure it is on all the way. Drill a pilot hole into the joint so that it goes straight through the pipe as well. Put a screw into the hole, but make sure you don't over-tighten it. PVC is soft enough that it's pretty easy to strip the thread made by the screw. For most applications, a single screw will be enough, but if you need to, you can add more at other places around the joint. Now this is important. If you need to disassemble, add registration marks to the joint and the pipe so that you line them up properly when you go to put them back together. Use a hammer to remove the joint or gently maneuver the pipe in a circular motion while pulling to work it out. Those are the basics for using PVC as structure. Now let's get into moving parts. PVC pipe and the connectors are made to fit together tightly, so to make a joint that moves, all you need to do is sand down either the pipe or the connector to widen the gap between them. Sanding the pipe is the easier method. A 1/2-inch pipe seats into the connector 3/4 of an inch, so that is the amount you need to make. You can use sandpaper or a grinding bit on a rotary tool. It may take several attempts before the pipe is loose enough. Take it slow because if you over sand, the joint will get too wobbly. You will have to hold the two sides of the joint together somehow. One great method is having a bolt all the way through the joint, holding it together. Now bolts that long tend to be expensive, so instead pick up some threaded rod and cut an appropriate size to make your own bolt. Use 2 nuts on each side. Tighten them against each other to lock them into place, because you don't want them rotating as your joint moves. Using a bolt also allows you to disassemble the joint if needed, but if you're certain you won't need to, then you could use a thick wire instead, bending it around the ends of the joint. Sanding the inside of a connector is the more difficult option, but it can result in a better joint. If you sand down the entire inside of a T-connector, it allows an unaltered pipe to slide all the way through. Then you can fasten connectors to both sides of the pipe. This keeps the joint together and has an overall stronger structure. Using connectors to make joints is precise and fairly simple, but you don't always have room in your project for such a large joint. So you need to make your own using the 2 ends of pipe and a bolt. Heat one end of the pipe until it is completely soft. Use 2 pieces of wood to clamp the end together. Make sure the clamp section is in line with the rest of the pipe, otherwise the joint will be crooked. When it's cooled, mark the point that is equidistant from the sides and the end of the pipe. Drill a hole for the bolt. Use your saw to trim the square edges of the end, and then sand or grind the end to a circular shape. The square edges tend to catch on the other side of the joint and add a pinching hazard as well, so it's best to round them out. On the other pipe, mark out a groove where the first pipe will fit. Use a hacksaw to cut out the groove and do your best to get the groove centered. The depth of the groove depends on how far you need the joint to swing. You will need to cut it deeper for a wider swing. Mark a similar spot on the sides and drill all the way through. Put the first piece in and fasten it with a bolt and nuts. You should use 2 nuts tightened together to keep the sides from compressing the joint, otherwise it won't move properly. This type of joint will tend to have more wobble to it, so try to get that groove just barely wide enough to fit the flattened end of the pipe. Now you should be able to do a good variety of construction with these techniques, so leave a comment, let me know what it is you've built. But before you go, I've got a bonus tip for you. The different sizes of pipe don't usually fit inside each other, but it is possible to cheat. Sand down the end of the smaller pipe, just to round off the edge a little. Heat up the end of the larger pipe until it is completely soft, then work the smaller pipe into it. Be sure to keep the pipe straight while it cools. You will notice that the larger pipe stretches a little where the smaller one is. Be aware that when the pipe cools, it will shrink a little. This will grip the smaller pipe tightly and make it extremely difficult to remove, so you should use this only as a permanent connection. So go and pick up some PVC pipe and get to work. Oh, wait, 1 second. Let me just check. Hey, you haven't subscribed yet. Come on, hit that button. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all later.